Hello everybody, it's Marco here, and today I will give you a quick walkthrough of the LitOS 0.9 Beta 3. This is the last beta release before the full official LitOS 0.9 release that we aim to ship in a couple of weeks. I will do a full review of this menu for those who are not familiar with Lit Duo 1 yet, but I will try to be as brief and quick as possible. So let's go right into it. In this new LitOS, you see that we have a new higher contrast highlight selection in the menu, in the main menu, as well in the option menus. This is something that many of you have been asking for. And you see now we are in the main menu where we can see all of the available modes. So let's quickly run through them. First, we have Illuminance mode, where we can measure illuminance. In each mode, you have in the top right corner, you have indicator of which sensor is actively measuring at that point. We have an icon of the mode. With blue button, you can return back to the menu, and with green button, you can access the mode specific settings that are specific for the mode that you're inside. So here in the Illuminance mode, we only have two options at this point. You can choose lux or foot candles as a unit, and you can enable sound. After the measurement is done, the unit can produce a short or long beep. This is useful if you're measuring in the darker environments, where sometimes the measurement can take slightly longer, and beep is a sound indicator to know when is the measurement done, and you can take your light meter away from that point. We will add to this mode ability to show additional units, for example, XY coordinates or color temperature or EV, and that will come in one of the next firmware updates. Let's go on. Next, we have CINE in photo mode. Those are the two ambient exposure modes. So in the CINE mode, you can cycle through the camera settings. You can change them, and then you can simply take the measurement, or you can hold the measurement and the device will keep measuring. Here at the top you see we have an indicator of the two sensors. So inside the mode settings, we can switch between the wide measuring angle to the narrow measuring angle. So now we are measuring with this sensor. This is useful for those of you who want to measure, for example, contrast between the 2 points. Inside this mode, as well in the photo video mode, you can dial in exposure offset, you can dial in anti-filter compensation, you can choose different parameter steps and different fractions of EV, and you can also choose different units for ND filters. And you can see that if you have ND filter and exposure value compensation dialed in, you see both of them separately on the top of the screen. We also have here an option to lock parameters, meaning that these parameters are not going to change until you unlock them. This is just so that if you're running around the set with the light meter turned on and in your pants, you're not going to change anything by mistake. Instead of locking and unlocking them inside the submenu, you can also do that just by long pressing the blue button, the menu button. So this mode is relatively simple right now. What is coming in the next update or two is ability to measure multiple points and see the difference between them either in EV steps or in ND filter values. And we also want to add a mode called camera target, where basically you can input all 4 values, so the 3 of these and aperture. You can log them, and then you can measure the difference to that combination of parameters expressed either as EV steps or ND filter values. We were getting requests for that, and we believe that many users will like it. Okay, let's go back and continue with the photo video mode. Photo video mode is very simple to the CINE mode. It just has one less parameter to define. Everything else inside is basically more or less the same as in the CINE video mode. What is coming up next in this mode is ability to switch it to the aperture priority mode, meaning that instead of ISO and shutter time, you will be able to define ISO and aperture, and then you will be measuring shutter time. And we will also add a third option where you will be able to lock aperture and time, and you will be measuring ISO value. In addition to that, we will also add ability, like in the CINE mode, we will add here the ability to measure multiple points and see a difference between them in EV steps or ND filter values. Let's go on. Photo flash. Here in photo flash mode, it's quite similar to the photo video mode, with one exception. When we press the button, you see the device is now waiting to detect and measure the flash. So I have a flash here next to me, and I will just trigger it. And you can see it measured the aperture, and it also shows you what share of the exposure has been contributed by the flashlight. And additionally, inside you can access the flash analysis submode, where you can see the actual flash curve together with T01 and T05 durations expressed as a fraction of a second or milliseconds. Those of you who are flash photographers will know exactly what this is about. And let me show you how well Lit Duo 1 measures the flash duration. I have increased the duration of the flash now, the intensity of the flash now, and I will now decrease it. So do another measurement. And you can see much shorter pulse, and before it was much longer pulse at a very low and very high flash strength. Other settings inside the flash mode are basically the same as in the CINE and photo video modes. Next one is color temperature mode. So here we can measure kelvins and tint, and inside we can choose between different tint units. What is new in this Lit OS version is ability to choose steps and define the number of steps. This will be useful for those of you who are using, for example, Lightroom or Capture One, or also want to input tint as a step compensation inside a camera, for example. You can again enable sounds here also, as in some of the other modes. And what's very new in this mode is ability to display more units, and this feature is coming to other modes also. So you can show up to 3 additional values. So I chose Illuminance, XY coordinates, and aperture, the CINE aperture, using the same settings and parameters as are currently set in the CINE mode. So you can see here, if I go back, beneath now, every time I take a measurement, it also shows me, in addition to Kelvin, tint, it also shows me lux value, XY coordinates, and CINE aperture. Personally, I mostly use it like this. So I can see every time I do a measurement, I can see Kelvin, tint, and lux, for example. By the way, this ability to show additional units, as I mentioned, will come also to CINE and photo video modes. So you will have an option to display additional values here right below the aperture value. We think you will like it. Next one is spectrum mode. In the spectrum mode, you see the graph of the spectrum, color temperature, tint, XY coordinates, and EV, I mean illuminance. And now you can also choose the color units. Before it was only XY coordinates, and now you can also choose HSI. And if you choose HSI, you can also choose different white point for the HSI. D65 is standard, but some lights, they can have configurable white points, and this way you can also configure it yourself. So now we are measuring HSI instead of XY coordinates. In this mode, for one of the next firmware updates, we will make a big rework. We will introduce more precise graph, and we will make the whole mode more configurable, so you can configure exactly the things that you want to see on which screen. And we will also bring CRI and other spectral measures of the light after that. So stay tuned, a lot of exciting things happening in the spectrum mode soon. Let's talk about the flicker mode. This is a new mode that took us more than 2 months to develop, and we are proud to say that this is probably one of the best flicker meters that exist currently on the market. So right now I'm in the flicker mode and I can move between 3 screens. I will explain to you what's happening. Right now I can take a reading and it will say no flicker here, meaning that there is no flicker. I have good lighting. But let me take a measurement of a light we are all familiar with, okay? Here. So you see on the first screen inside the flicker mode, we see the light power. It shows us what share of the total light power is flickering at which frequency. Meaning that when we measured our tungsten light, we see that 79% of the total light power is not flickering. It's basically constant. And then this flickering part at the top represents 15% of the total light power. And it's flickering at 99.18 Hertz. If there would be more flickering frequencies detected, they would be printed out beneath. So this is the first screen, and then in the second screen we see the analysis of that signal. We see the maximum value, the average lux value, and the minimum lux value. And we also show 2 standard measures of the flicker. Those of you who work with the human-centric lighting design will be familiar with those terms: flicker percentage and flicker index. And now the third screen is probably the most interesting for the video and filmmakers. On this screen, you can first, inside the mode settings, you can define your camera FPS, and then you can also define target shutter angle that you want to use on your project. And then when you measure the flicker, this screen will show you 5 closest shutter angles or shutter times equivalents, and it will show you the one that is the closest to your desired shutter angle. So you see at this light, under this tungsten light that is flickering with this frequency, the closest shutter angle, if you're rolling your camera on 24 FPS, the closest is 174.2 or 1/50 of a second. Let me show you also, for example, I have this torchlight here and I can put it on the maximum, and you see there's no flicker because it's running on the 100% PVM cycle. If I reduce the power, you'll see it's flickering with 20 kilohertz. And here you can see the available shutter angles that will not make any artifacts on the footage. I can also show you, for example, I have another small LED panel here. I can measure this one, See, this one has slightly different frequency, but also very close to 20 kilohertz. And you can see you can use these shutter angles, and you should get flicker-free footage. Inside this mode, you can, as I already mentioned, define your camera FPS. You can choose your target angle. Here you can also choose different sampling rate, because the sampling rate at which light is sampled defines the minimum and maximum frequency that can be detected, and also defines the resolution of the measurement. I would recommend you to just use auto, because we implemented very smart algorithm that basically samples on all 3 frequencies every time, and then compares them and analyzes and decides which one of them is the most accurate for the detected frequencies. Of course, you can also here enable sound, and you can hide certain screens if you don't use them, or if you're not interested in them. For example, if you're not so interested in the analysis part, you can hide it, and then you can only conveniently jump between the first screen that is always visible, that shows you the light power, how it's flickering, and how much and at which frequencies. And then the second one can only be shutter screen that shows you the safe shutters. And of course you can choose different Illuminance units. One caution or information in the flicker mode. Flicker mode needs at least 500 lux to work very accurately. Well, it can have less intensity also, but it might not be entirely accurate. This is still much better than any other flicker meter on the market. Many of them require 5000 lux or even more. So we believe that you'll be able to successfully measure also flickering rates of different displays or monitors and stuff like that with this app. And new features and improvements to the flicker mode will be done based on your feedback. We hope that you will play with it as much as possible and give us your feedbacks. Okay, so those were the measuring modes, and I can quickly run you through the general device settings. First, we have Bluetooth options. That's self-explanatory. You can enable or disable Bluetooth. Then we have continuous measuring. You can enable continuous measuring, meaning that when you go, for example, in the measuring mode, instead of pressing and holding the button, you can just press it and device will continue measuring by itself. And then when you press the button again, it will stop measuring. You can choose this display backlight. The best is auto, and I was just using maximum for the purpose of this demo. You can choose different battery type. If you choose the right battery type, the battery charge indicator will work more accurately. And of course, you can also enable battery charging. So when you have rechargeable batteries inserted and you plug in the charger, it will charge. Of course, let me show you. You can run your device, if you would run out of batteries, also just on a cable. You can actually even plug your cable into your iPhone and device will work. It will just show that it's running on the cable. Let me put this back and continue with the demo. So we were looking at the battery type and battery charging. And then here we have advanced settings. And in advanced settings, you can enable or disable that the device opens in the last used screen. You can also customize home, meaning that you can hide some of the modes that you're not using. I use all of them because I need to test, so I will enable them back. You have an ability to define auto power off. I use 20 minutes. And here you have 3 options to tune global results for ambient exposure, for flash exposure, and for illuminance. So every Lit Duo 1 unit is calibrated according to our targets, and if you want, or if you have different preference, or if you have a certain combination of gear that works better with higher exposure or lower exposure, you can of course define this, you can tune this to your taste. This feature might evolve into something like camera profiles and things like that. We will see. And then you have device info, where you can see your installed firmware, and you have some regulatory info, the boring stuff, and you can perform factory restore on your Lit Duo 1. That's it. Turn it off, turn it on, ready to measure. Stay tuned for new firmware updates. Thank you so much.